Behind me is an 1880s house that our company remodeled that has 2-foot thick stone walls, single pane glass windows, and some crazy modern architectural details in the back. But how does that meet code? On the Build Show today, we're going to be talking about the difference between performance-based and prescriptive-based codes, and I'm going to give you a tour of this gorgeous house. Let's get going. On the Build Show today, we're going to be talking about the difference between performance-based codes and prescriptive codes. And we're going to use this 1880s house with a very interesting and modern addition on the back as an example. Now, we're on the AIA home store. You're probably going to see some people in the background filtering through. And also want to give a huge shout out to the architect in this project, Hugh Jefferson Randolph. Amazing project, melding a very old house with a really modern addition and doing it very seamlessly. But the point of today's video is, how do you meet codes when you've got some things that clearly don't meet the prescriptive codes? Now, when we think of codes, I'm specifically talking about energy codes. That's the IECC, the International Energy Conservation Codes. And when we think of that, we usually have some values in our mind. For instance, R20 for walls, or a U factor on windows of 0.30. Those are part of what I would call the prescriptive code. That means that as long as we pick that prescription, we can meet code. And usually when you're coming for your inspections, that's what the inspector's looking for. What's the value on the windows? How much insulation in the walls? How efficient is your heating and cooling equipment? All those kinds of things are under the prescriptive code. But in this case, we've got an 1880s house, very old house with 2-foot thick stone walls, the original single pane windows, and in this modern portion of the house, I've got some locally fabricated and very cool awning style steel windows and doors. So there's no sticker from the manufacturer in those. How do we meet code, and how do we make sure that the overall house is very efficient for our clients, which is, of course, the most important thing beyond code. And that's where the performance-based comes in. What we do on a house like this is we give the house the overall envelope and what's going to happen, the schedule of values for all the things that are going to be put in that we know of, and for the things that we don't, we give them what we can, and they model the house in an energy model program. Now, my local company, Positive Energy, did that for us here. And so they took those 2-foot thick stone walls, the single pane glass. They also inputted what we were doing in the roof. So for instance, on this giant roof behind me here on the house, we've got a metal roof, which gives us a radiant barrier. And then I've got 6 inches of closed cell spray foam up there in the rafters, as well as some rigid foam on top of that. So even though my walls are uninsulated, I've got a massive insulation and a great air seal at the top of the house. So what they do is they input all those values, and the performance-based code means that if I can show that the overall house, the overall envelope, the overall energy uses on an annual basis is as good or better as a prescriptive house, I'm good to go. I'm able to show that. And by hiring an engineer to do that, I'm able to model the house. Now, there's some testing that's involved as well, right? Because it's not just the model, but it's actually what did we build. And a big part of that testing is the blower door test and how airtight is the house. For instance, when you buy an expensive cooler, a Yeti cooler, you fill that cooler with ice. If you were to leave the lid up on a summer day, how long is that ice going to stay cold before it melts? Not very long, but if you close down that lid and lock it down, and oh, by the way, the expensive coolers have a really nice gasket around the lid, that means that ice is going to stay cold for a long, long time. The same goes with our houses. Even though this house is very old, we were able to air seal a ton on this house and really make sure that the envelope was very tight from an air sealing perspective, so that even though I've got some windows that may not meet code and are less efficient than what an off-the-shelf window would be from a manufacturer, the overall house, when it comes to air tightness and the areas that we did extra insulation, that yields a house that's much more efficient than a code-built house. The HVAC equipment factors into that as well. We used a full Mitsubishi system on this house with their variable refrigerant flow technology. And so between the overall envelope, the air sealing, the equipment that we used, we were able to show the inspector with a report out of an energy model that in fact this house, even though it has several components that don't meet code, the overall house on an annualized basis does meet code. And of course the house is gorgeous too. Now, This is not intended for you to build less good houses, right? You know, the idea in this video especially is for people that are doing remodels or historic houses or older houses. But some of this could come into play on a newer house as well. Let's say you wanted to use a system for windows and doors, or a section of the house that doesn't come with an off-the-shelf sticker. This is how you can do it, is you can do a performance-based code, and you can give that report to the inspector. You're gonna need an energy model, and you're gonna need the testing and be able to hand those reports to your inspector to show that you've met code. Guys, I hope this video was helpful for you. Be sure to find somebody locally that you can partner with if you've got a house like this of historic nature where you're trying to do some interesting architectural details. Probably your architect or your builder are gonna know who to contact locally in your area to get those reports done for you. And of course, shoot for the best house that you can find. You know, one of the things I love about this 1880s house is those 2-foot thick stone walls. Even though they're not insulated, there's huge thermal mass there, which means that this house, even though it never got insulation until we remodeled it, you know, for 100-some years, or never had central air conditioning either for that matter, there were just some window rattlers in there. It's actually a pretty darn comfortable house in the summertime, because the sun, when it heats that rock on the outside, it has to heat up 2 foot thick of rock that's already cold, and before that heat is going to transfer to the inside of the house, which means that in the summertime, very, very comfortable house here, even though we have no insulation in the walls. Guys, thanks for joining me. New videos every Tuesday and every Friday. Hit that subscribe button below. Otherwise, follow us on Twitter or Instagram. We'll see you next time on The Build Show.